People in pretty much every other country across the globe see their fellow citizens in a positive light, but in America, not so much. A new Pew Research survey found that the US is the only place where the majority of residents say their countrymen are bad. Before we get into the numbers, Cenk, you might have a different perspective based on your media appearances and globetrotting lately. What do you think?
So I think there's a reason why we hate each other more than other countries hate each other. I think it's our media, I think it's our politics. So I'm gonna explain my theory after Jordan gives you all the facts.
So let's start with this. The percent of people who rate the morality of people in their country as good or bad. And you could see United States followed by Turkey.
Wait,
Brazil.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
Is this hit home to you?
Places Cenk has lived. Okay.
Jamaica's not on here as Mr. Jamaica, so.
Oh, okay, dodged the bullet on that one.
Yeah. Well, so you could see the US ranks at the top. Now, the survey released this week found that 53% of American adults described the morality and ethics of their fellow citizens as either somewhat or very bad. Closest to the United States was Turkey, where 49% of adults rated their compatriots as bad. That means in 24 out of 25 countries included in the survey, the majority of people said the other residents there are good. America is the one exception. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum from the US is Canada, where a whopping 92% of people say their fellow Canadians are good, while just 7% say they're bad. Indonesia, India, Sweden, Australia, and Japan followed closely behind. This is the first time Pew asked this specific question on their survey, so we don't know if or how these numbers have changed over time. They also didn't ask follow-up questions that would have revealed why Americans see each other in such a poor light. But Scott Sheeman, a sociologist who studies the social psychology of Americans and Canadians, argues Americans tend to think broadly that most other people are worse than they themselves are. Political partisanship likely also plays a huge role. More than half of the countries surveyed showed a partisanship bias, meaning that people who prefer political parties out of power and particularly likely to view their fellow citizens as immoral, the report found. In the US, Pew found 60% of Democrats and those who lean Democratic saw their fellow citizens as morally or ethically bad, while 46% of Republicans did. Previous polls have found similar evidence of partisanship hatred, but showed different results when it comes to how Democrats feel versus Republicans. A 2022 Pew poll showed a sharp rise among Americans in negative views about people from the other political party. 47% of Republican Americans and 35% of Democrats in 2016 said people in the opposing party were immoral. That jumped to 72% of Republicans and 63% of Democrats in 2022. Keith, what do you think? You've worked with Republicans in the past. Are they bad?
I think most people in the country are good. Is that also I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I think most people in this country are good, and I think that this is working exactly as they intend it to. When we are divided, we are much easier to conquer. But on all of the issues, war, Israel, on the cost of living, healthcare, we all agree. Now, we might have different ways of wanting to get to a certain place, but we all agree that it's not working. This country's not working for most people. So it actually makes me very, I don't want to say sad, but it's very disappointing to see that my fellow Americans, we see each other as enemies rather than team members to try to create a better country. One reason why I like James Salarico, because he's labeling this stuff in a way that I think is really important and I think works. Because he's saying exactly what's happening, which is that the oligarchs, the billionaires, the algorithms have designed it this way so that we see each other as the enemies, and we don't talk about the things that are actually going on in this country and the problems that they're creating, and talking about the fact that if we all work together, we can actually solve some really big problems. And it's the very few in this country that don't want that to happen.
Yeah, so I had a lot to say here. First, I want to try to notice patterns, right? So among the countries that don't like one another, right, within the country, I noticed two patterns. One is a fundamentalist leader driving a wedge between the people. So in America, we have Trump and we're number one. Oh, the other side is bad and immoral, right? And and then he does so many immoral things that the Democrats then go, no, you're immoral. Same exact phenomenon is in Turkey, and they come in number two. Erdogan, more of a fundamentalist leader. Oh, we're the moral ones, they're the immoral ones. And then the secular Turks are super mad at the fundamentalist Turks. So exact same pattern. Third country is Brazil, where Bolsonaro did something very, very similar, right? So I'm surprised Hungary isn't on the list. Orban is also doing something similar to that. So that's an interesting pattern, right? And I think that that's gonna go to the larger point about media and politics in a second. The second pattern I noticed, I don't know if it's real or not, but Turkey, Greece, Italy, all Mediterranean countries. France, you could argue, is a Mediterranean country. So maybe in the Mediterranean countries, we fight more. I don't know, but that's a random one. Okay, now in the countries that generally like one another, the patterns are harder to tell. So I like Indonesia being number two there. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. So, oh no, Muslims can't get along. Oh, they can when there's no one riling them up to hate each other or et cetera, et cetera. But to me, the really interesting one was Canada. We're number one in hating each other the most. Canada's number one in liking each other the most. And otherwise, we're incredibly similar, right? So what's different about us between Canada and the US? Well, our media is different. And our politics is different. So when they first started seeing Canada, Fox News in Canada, I remember we covered on the show, the reactions were like, whoa, what is this? How evil are these guys? And are they're allowed to say that on TV in America, right? And so, because in Canada, as far as I know, there were not this Fox News, MSNBC, and that entire media industrial complex driving a wedge between us. And it's literally called wedge issues here in America. And our politicians try to find, I'll give you another example, it's amazing. So, you know how the right wing in this country, Republicans, et cetera, are like, oh my God, they're all pro-life, and abortion for a long, long time was the number one issue. And even if you were terrible on everything else, they'd vote on that one issue alone because they cared so much about it. It's so core to their beliefs. So hence, what's weird is in the 1973 is when Roe v. Wade happened. Did you know that none of the Republicans or even evangelical Christian leaders had come out against Roe v. Wade until 1978, 5 years later? In fact, a lot of the churches were split on which way to go. But in 78, a Republican strategist tried to win on the issue of abortion in 5 different areas. And what they did was they started printing out flyers with dead babies. And that worked so well because it created this visceral emotion. Oh my God, the Democrats are killing babies. And then from then on, they're like, oh yes, of course. The issue we care most about is abortion and babies and life. And then all of a sudden, all the politicians on the right wing, all the evangelical pastors, now remember, hate the other side, they kill babies, right? And nowadays, the Democrats are so sick of what the Republicans have done over and over again. I gotta be honest, guys, a lot of the Democrats hate the right wing, right? So the right wing might have hated us based on ethnicity, race, sex, gender, all those different things. But now I feel that there's significant hatred in the left for the right, right? So, and when you see that happen, that means they won. Hatred has won and wedge issues have won. And so, because when we have an equal amount of hate, it's not like the left wins. No, the right wins when you have an equal amount of hate. Because hate helps corruption, that helps authoritarian governments take over. That's why Erdogan did it. That's why Trump did it. That's why Bolsonaro did it, right? So if you're on the right wing, that doesn't mean like, oh, you did it. I'm not trying to spread that hatred, right? But there are people in leadership that know these things, that know these psychological phenomena, and they push them forward. That didn't happen in Canada, and look at the gigantic difference. What do you think, Jordan?
I think it's a few different things. It's like some of the elements that Keith talked about. It's just a perfect cocktail of hate. And it's, in part, it is our elections being way too long relative to other developed countries, other countries on this list. Our cycles shock people in other countries. You have a quick snap election in places like Canada and Great Britain. They're over in a few weeks. The campaign finance system pummeling you with ads, reaching new and new lows. I mean, I don't want to get in, I think it's a distraction, but I also think like you could just take a look at that Tallarico and Crockett race. That's a perfect example. You have two candidates who on paper are extremely similar, running two different styles of campaign. And you would have thought that people who support, based on what you saw online and how people talked about supporters of Tallarico, you would have thought he was inciting a new clan. It's unhealthy. And then you have, I think a big part of it is just the death rattle of a late stage empire, where you have greed at all-time highs, you have inequality at all-time highs, and they are trying to paper over the rot by keeping you distracted and mad at your neighbor. There's a sense of distrust, there's a sense of animus, and they deliberately stoke those coals so you don't turn your eyes to the real enemy. And then I also want to recommend people try to get a better sense of how your political opponent might think. And there's a book that came out a couple years ago. It's called Outraged by Kurt Gray. He runs the Deepest Beliefs Lab at UNC. And I actually recommended it to Anna, who read it and also interviewed him after I did, because we both found it so fascinating. Because what he does is he studies how people form their opinions and why. And reading that book really opened my eyes to why conservatives think the way they do, and why people that might have a different opinion on policy than me, why they reach those conclusions. And really it boils down to who do they see as the aggressor and who do they see as the victim. And you'll see how people are depicted in people's minds. The more evil they become, the less people, in people's minds, the less people think they are capable of feeling pain. And you could just, all of these studies that he's conducted for years in this book, and reading it really helped me understand why people might have a difference of opinion. I would encourage you all to check it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the last couple things too. So number one, I said the right wing wins if there's more hatred. That's a little inexact, right? It's actually authoritarianism that wins. Because if you're and all the guys I listed, they happen to be on the right, Bolsonaro, Erdogan, and Trump, but really their defining trait is authoritarianism. And so, and if you think about it, unfortunately, it's easy to trap us in this trap, because once they start the hatred against you, if you don't counter it effectively, they're gonna win. If you do counter it and you hate them back, they're gonna win, right? Because the point is the hatred. Yoda was right, right? So it's very difficult to counter. And how did, for example, Martin Luther King counter it and win in the civil rights movement? He didn't go, let's hate them more and win. He said, no, let's stop playing that game altogether and actually love them. That is revolutionary, and it worked. And I think it can work again. Keith is absolutely right. I would say that we as a country, as citizens, agree on at least 70% of the issues. Yes, there are real issues we disagree on, abortion, and we can name many others, right? But on lower drug prices, lower housing prices, higher wages, better health care, we could go on and on and on. And not only would we agree, but Republicans and Democrats would go, of course. The one I always cite is paid family leave. It polls at 84% because we both think that moms should get 12 weeks off after they have a baby instead of going back to the assembly line on the next day. Of course. But they drive a wedge between us, and then we get divided and we hate each other, and the authoritarians win. And look, the original algorithm that started all this was called mainstream media. And so they have been dividing us for as long as I have been alive. So stop playing that game with them. So, and I know it's hard because when you don't hate the other side, there are consequences. You get accused of being a sellout, etc. So let's have a little bit of courage. That's my suggestion, right? And lastly, I'll end on a fun note, right? So folks who hate each other internally, how's Russia not on this list? And number one, they have an authoritarian leader in Putin. Number two, do you guys know the old joke about the Russians? God comes down and says to a Russian, "I'll give you anything you want, just one catch." First of all, the guy's super excited. He's like, "Anything I want is amazing, right?" And he's like, "But whatever you get, your neighbor will get twice as much." And he's like, "Oh God." He's like, he thinks about it for a long time. He goes, "All right, take out one of my eyes." That's the joke about the Russians, and even they didn't make the list, and we did. So come on, America, we got to do better than this. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.